Vamos next time. Okay, so you still
Like a trap.
I should be going. It's not. Here.
I think so. It's settled that left. Came with it's about the Chupah. This is something that I wrote about it years ago in one of the Svarim of Shiur that they have, but in this Amedish V'loich Kiddush. So can't repeat what you wrote once before. So it will be additional Shmuyim or whatever it is. Mainly, it's about the Shittas Rambam, what Chupah is. And it's connected to the beginning of Ksubis because of the Ran, the beginning of Ksubis. The Gemara says that one of the times that he's not Chayik to be mindful of the even though the 12 months came up, but the Gemara says, she became a Nida, then he can't marry her. Rabbi, it's not his fault. Not his fault. So he doesn't have to give him the fact that he's not going to marry her by the day of 12 months is not his fault. Maybe he's supposed to give him That's what the Gemara says. Comes Aran and Aran explains what's the reason why he can't marry her. Why can't he marry her? So the Aran brings two shittas. He said like this. From one way, it shows that it fits if you hold that Chupah is Yichud. There are different opinions what Chupah is. Actually, they put it into 7 shittas what Chupah is. One shitta is that Chupah is Yichud. The fact that they go into a room and they have Yichud together, the Shem the Suyin, that is called Chupah. She comes to the Surah. The Pele is Bechlal that when you get Kedushin, we have a whole Sichtah that talks about what's Kedushin, Hayim Kaddish, Kesef, Shtar, Bebi, all kinds of Limudim. We don't find anywhere in the Gemara what Chupah is. We find in the Gemara the concept of Chupah. If Chupah is a Nesua, when she becomes a Nesua, there's a different din than she's a Psula. I mean, she's an Arusa. When she's an Arusa for Kedushin, she's a nation siege. But there are certain dinim that's still not finished yet. When she becomes a Nesua, Chupah, then there are other dinim. Lamoshel, he's made for her till then the husband's. When she's an Arusa, both have to be made for the father and the husband. He's not Matamalo, he's not Yerushalah. If she's Mazana, if she's an Arusa, she gets Skila, she's an Asura, she gets Chenek. So there are a lot of different dinim between an Arusa and an Asura. What an Arusa is, we know. You give Kedushin. Kesef, Shtar, or Biyah, she becomes an Arusa. What makes a woman to an Asura? Through Chupah. One in the world is Chupah. You want to state what Chupah actually is. So there are many shittas, 7 shittas what Chupah is. So the Ran says, here we see that Chupah is Yichud. That they have to be in one room by Yichud, the Shem Nesuyin, then she becomes a Nesuyin, that's Chupah. And we see it from this Gemara. Because otherwise, why can't he marry her when she's a Nida? What's wrong if she's a Nida? You can still marry her. So the Ram says the reason you can't marry her because Chupah is Yichud, and the Nida is Asura Beyichud. When is a Nida Mutter Beyichud? Only if Kvar Bo'alel. A Nida is one of the Arayas. And with an Arayah, one of the Ereves, you can't have Yichud. So how could a person have Yichud with his wife every time she's a Nida? She's one of the Arayas. The answer is because if Kvar Bo'alel, and there are certain Hachokas that the Chachamim made, so that's okay. But if Leib Bo'alel, it's also Beyichud. But that's why if she became a Nida, you can't marry her, can't have Yichud with her. So from here we see that Chupah is Yichud, and that's why Pirsanida, you can't have Chupah. Then he says there's another Shita, that it means Achnos Alabais. He brings her home. According to that Shita, what's the Pshat the Gemara? Why can't he have Chupah if she's a Nida? Can bring her home if she's a Nida? So the Pshat Daran says is a little different. Not because he can't. The Chachamim were not mechayiv him to give her mezainis if he's bringing her home and he can't have bia with her anyway. So Chachamim said if he can't have bia anyway, we're not mechayiv. So not because he can't have chupah. He could have chupah, but you're not mechayiv him to have the chupah. What's the purpose of the chupah? But Mela, it's not his fault because she's a nida, and there's Chachamim were not mechayiv to marry him. That's what he put. But Akaponim here we see in the Ran two shittas in what the gather of chupah is. One is chupah is yichud, and one that chupah is nosel abas. The Rambam, what does the Rambam hold? It's negaya the end of chupah. So we see the Rambam here, Perek Yud Halacha Aleph, where the Rambam talks about chupah. Perek Yud starts like this, and it's negaya to go to the Lishemus of the Rambam. Aruso asuro labaylo medivrei seifrim calls Mashim Pesavia. Naruso is also to have bia with her husband. It's only the Rabban. Not only that, Abal is also maknas badis. But feeling kitcho bebia. Good. And he makes her for him. So, and then the Rambam goes, I'll read weiter. This yichud is called knisa l'chupah. So, what does the Rambam Lepel come out here hold that chupah is? So you have like this. Chelkas Mechayik says the Rambam holds that the ikir is achnos alabais. Whatever it says. Most Achrayim don't learn like that. Most Achrayim learn that the Rambam holds both. He said before two shitas, whether it's yichud, achnos alabais. The Rambam says both. The Rambam says that all when is shemuter, at sheyovi the beisei, ve'yisyachadim, and they even add not only but yafrishenali. The Rambam adds that even achnos alabais is not enough. He brings her once home for a minute. Has to bring her home, but now you're in my house. And she become you're more fresh to me, and that's what called chupah is. That's what the Rambam holds. So this is the Lashon Rambam, and then the Rambam says weiter to be begayik in the Lishayin. Abo ala rusose l'shem nisuyim achashakinsho. If he gave her kedushin, and then bo'alel l'shem nisuyim, he's not allowed to have bia with her as an arusa, but he's having bia with her. That this should be the Nesuyin, Mishik, Irabo, Konda, Benasas Nesuyin, Barei Ishtal Cholto. In other words, the Rambam says another thing here, that not only what he said before, Chnos Labayis and Yichud, maybe even Yakfisheno, makes Chupah, but Bia makes Chupah. If he has Bia, the Shem Nesuyin becomes Nesuyin.
Be aware.
Huh?
Be aware. That makes a difference.
You're touching a point which we're going to talk about, but the Rambam is mashmet that Bia anywhere. See, anyway, it doesn't have to be basic.
Sign for base final. Base Avia.
Base Avia. Could be Base Avia also if he doesn't do Shem Nesuyin. And then he says, Ki mishanichnas arusa l'chupah, then there is a mutter lo v'ilel b'chol she'yirtze, v'arehi ishte gemura l'chol. So after chupah, she's ishte l'gemura l'chol dover, v'shetikonis l'chupah, nikras l'sunah, afa p'shelei nibel hushtiya royally. Avalim hoysa nida, afa p'shenichnas l'chupah v'nisyachadima, lei gomra nesuyin barei kerus. So Rambam here says like this. What is Chupah? Chupah is Achnos Lebayis and Yichud. And it has to be, not Stam Achnos, but that's like an extra point. Achnos Lebayis and Yichud. So if she's a nida, which is a yichud she'ein eroi lebiyah, she still remains an arus. That's what the Rambam says. Interesting that even though in the Ran, this is a side point, according to the Ran, chupah is yichud, and therefore you're not allowed to have chupah snida because you're not allowed to have yichud. So the Chura is the same like the Rambam. The Rambam also says chupah snida is no good. The difference between the Ran and the Rambam is, according to the Ran, but the evidence is good. According to the Ran, there's nothing wrong with the yichud if it's not royal. It doesn't say it has to be a yichud royal labiyah. The reason why you can't do it because you're not allowed to have yichud. It says zaytik din. What happens if you didn't do it? And he had yichud with the nida l'shem chup l'shem. I have a friend who's a very good sport. So there he has this diukim, and he has a beer in Rambam, which I want to dispute and say a different beer, because otherwise, you know the joke they say that one summer came a mile, someone that's a big lamb, met the Eibishter, doesn't be such a lamb, learn so much better. So the Eibishter asked him, you come here for mile, saves Achidish. So he says to the Eibishter, you know what, you say Yichud Rav. Same thing. So there are common you can hit in Rambam. Number one, then he says another thing. If you have Bia, she's an Arusa, and he has Bia with her. So that's Kaina, the Nas is Nisua. So he makes it clear that if you have Bia, L'Shem Nisua, she's Ishtay. And then the Rambam says, by the other case, where you have Kimish and Nichmas Arusa L'Chuppah, Arehi Ishtay Gemura L'Choldom. When he's making does Chupah through Bia, it's Ishtay L'Choldom. If he does Chupah through the regular way of Chupah, it's Ishtay Gemura L'Choldom. What is the pshat in that? Why is there a different notion? What is Ishtay Gemura? And here is not Gemura. Also, another thing here. He says if she's a nida, afa pishenichnas al Chupah v'nishyachadimet, lei gomru hanisui. What does that mean? Lei gomru hanisui. V'arei ki arusa adai. Let me like Gomri. Ain't on the Surah. I didn't care Rusa. What's the Lashon like Gomri on the Surah? So here, Bemis, you could say that this Lashon goes after the Gemara in Kedushin. I've uses the word. There's a machlekes. We'll get to it a little later. The machlekes between Rabbi and Rabbi, whether a Chupah could make Kedushin. The Gemara says that Chupah is gamer. Certainly, Chupahs could start. So Chupah is gamer. So the Gemara uses the Lashon that Chupah finishes. That means it makes the whole Nisuyin. So the Rambam follows that Lashon, maybe like that. Also, it's not a good teretz because so why does the Rambam say it? What's the pshat like gomer on the Nisuyin? So he has a whole beer like this. There are two dinim. There's a din of Chupah as a kinyan Chupah to make the Chupah valid, and she becomes a din asur. And asur has certain dinim, the Kamalo and Yersho and Ikemidoreo. She gets chenek, not all kinds of dinim that you have. Then you have another thing here that the narusa is asur alabayla, asur bia by arusa. And you have to have the Chupah part, there's a part of Chupah which is matir her, the Bible, matir the bia. And he says, what makes him say it is because there's another kasha, a little bit like Akdama to the status. Another kasha is, from here is mashman, that bia doesn't have to be b'tei basic. So the Fedish in the Forshim, in the Geya, regular yichud, the regular chupah, which is yichud, has to be achnosel basic. By bia, it doesn't say that. The Rambam doesn't say it. The Rambam just says, "Aboal aresos of the shep nisuyim achashekitcho, ishiraba kono v'nasas nisua varei ishtel l'chaldover." It doesn't say it has to be, like you mentioned before. It doesn't have to be b'teich beisei. And the shaila is why? Why doesn't it have to be b'teich beisei? The whole union of Chupah b'chlal is, as the Ran says in a different place, the Lashon is mishum lesa the bia. It's all as akdama to bia, to be able to have bia. That's before that you can't have bia. The Chupah makes you be able to have bia. So why is it that if bia doesn't need to be b'teich beisei, why does the regular Chupah have to be b'teich beisei? What's the difference between the two? So he tries to say like this, that there are these two dinim. The din that it has to be achnosel beisei is not a din that has to do with the kinyan of Chupah, whatever Chupah accomplishes. That doesn't have to be b'teich beisei. That is only lahat bia. I mean, I said the svara is, because if it's not b'teich beisei, it looks more like preachers. Not b'teich beisei, he's having beer with her. And he's having, so that's be'achnos l'bayis. So he says like this, achnos l'bayis is not the gear to the kinyan of Chupah. Without achnos l'bayis, the Chupah is kain. And what does it mean that Chupah is kain? Now she is a yanasua, in the sur for all other things, except she says still asur l'bayis. When he does the b'teich beisei, then she becomes mutar l'bayis. And that's what he says. That's how he explains all the kashas that we ask. When the Rambam says in the beginning, it has to be so he says two things. And yichud. Then the Rambam says, what is the chupah, not achnos l'bayis? The chupah, as a kinyan chupah, to make her into a gather of the surah, is the yichud. That's all. Yichud zeh hu anikra knisa l'chupah. That's the suyim b'chol bakim. But it doesn't allow her still. If you just do yichud, it doesn't allow her. If it's not b'teich beisei, it doesn't allow her to be in. And therefore, when it says, "Aboal l'resos l'shem nisuyim," so it works. Even if it's not, because l'gaba other dinim, it works. Aboal l'resos, not in the teich beisei. Aboal l'resos, it works that she's now in the suyim. Harei ishte l'chol tov. But he says it's not ish, it's l'chol dover, but not ishte gemura. There's still something that is not allowed. He's not allowed to have beer with him because it wasn't take besa. Right? Take besa. When it comes later, the next halacha, kim shenichnas arusa l'chupah, arei mutar lovele b'cholei sheyirtze, v'arei ish the gemura, because by a regular chupah, and regular chupah is a combination of yichud and achnosa l'beisei. Now it's just ish the gemura. Now he's just a complete ishtay. That even beer is allowed. And that's why later on, when it says, Aber im Haus dann nieder, after she nicht Chupah, leit gomro on the suyid. Why leit gomro on the suyid? Because if she was a nida, they had regular Chupah, which is yichud nachnos alabayis. She's stuck on the suah. What's missing here is because it wasn't betir beisei. It's all. If it was betir beisei, so legaba bia, it's allowed. But legaba the other things, it's not allowed. In other words, he says, if it was betir beisei, if nichnas ala chupah v'nisyachet imo, in the regular case, so if it was betir beisei, she's allowed. But lepel, there's a chasson in the fact that it was not royal bia. If it was not, what does it say here? If it's not royal bia, so if it was betir beisei, she's allowed to have bia. But the kedushin is, but the chupah is not complete. If it was nichnas al chupah nisyachet imo, and there was not betir beisei, if nichnas al chupah, if hoysa neither, afab shenichnas al chupah, but nisyachet imo lei gomer an nesuyin, it's not complete. What's missing? If it the chupah, which was if it was the chupah, and there was no bia, but it was not royal bia, so the yichud doesn't work. So if the yichud doesn't work, so it's not for the other things, it's not good, but it's enough that she's allowed to have bia. Because it was betir beisei. The yichud is missing here. There's two things. There's the yichud and the betir beisei. So he wants to be mechalek that way, that there are two dinim, and that's why the Rambam says these l'sheinas. The only pella is to say that is a little bit modern. What are we saying here? That it's a yichud she'ein royal bia, and then bia would be enough. It's in nisyachet imo. Then it's ein royal bia, and what does it work? That you could have bia, but she's not the real nesuah. What's the mechalek between being a real nesuah and being muter labayis? So he wants to say that the chnos labayis is negeya only legaba bia, and if there's no chnos labayis, bia doesn't work. You can't do bia. But if there was chnos labayis, even though the yichud is not so good, you could have bia. But legaba other things it doesn't work, which is lochachura and ipcha mistaver. That yichud she'ein royal bia would make it that she's allowed to have bia, just matir bia. That makes it's a little bit verkehrt. It's a very strange way to learn that achnos labayis, and therefore like this. I feel going back to before, when you have bia with her, what happens if you have bia? Haba ala resosei, harei ishtei, l'chol dover. But what does l'chol dover mean? Not kabura, but l'chol dover for other things, not for bia. If you had this chupah through bia, she's also for bia. It's a modernist type of sort to say. So he's saying I ishte l'chol dover, but not for bia, because it wasn't betir beisei, not for bia. But l'chura, if it's not for bia, so why do you have to be catered through bia? If it's not for bia, because you don't need achnos labayis, for bia you need achnos labayis. Otherwise, you don't need. So there was everything here. There was yichud, because if you ball there was yichud, and yichud is kaina except for bia. That's what he's saying. If yichud is kaina except for bia, why do you need the bia? The bia itself is obviously there yichud. How else was there bia? There was yichud. Either wasn't the beisei. Who cares if it wasn't the beisei? According to his pshat, yichud itself makes the chupah, but not for heter bia. But if you have bia without beisei, the same thing happens. For bia, it doesn't work because it's not the beisei, but it works for other things. So harei isha l'chol dover, but not for bia. Why? Because there was yichud here. So then what's the pshat here? Came through bia. What can it be? Bia means there was yichud also. And if yichud itself, according to his pshat, yichud itself is good enough, then what's the pshat here? The kedushin of bia. Bia means there was yichud, and if there was yichud, she's nesua. For bia not in chanama, but you're still saying bia. So what's the chiddush of? Anyway, it's a motazach to be mechalek that way. I would like to say, to answer these shilas, let me say in the opposite way. The Hagdim, when it comes to the union of Eidus and Nesuin, she becomes an Arusa through Dushtan, and she becomes in the Surah through Chupah. So there is a Chira. Are they two separate things? Or it's one is a hemshich to the other? In other words, do we say there are two million? There's two parts in marriage. There's Kedushin, it's one. And that makes sense. And there's another part. It's a separate nekuda, so to speak. Another part that you come and you have to do the soil. That does not through Chupah. Or it's all one. It's one hemshach. There's one nekuda here. You have Kedushin, that's the beginning, and it goes all the way to the Suyin, which basically would, I want to put it in other words. Kedushin, the Suyin is when they get together. Kedushin is when you tell her, you tell her B'dibur that I'm Yachid to me. And then you have the Yichud B'Peil, that you become B'Peil you. And that's what the Suyin is. It's not like you have two stages. It's a beginning and an end of the same thing. And what is the union of the Chupah? It's the actual Chaya issues. In other words, can we call, let's use these words, Chupah a kinyan, let's use the words. There's a kinyan of Kedushin, there's a kinyan of Nesuin, a kinyan of Chupah. Or you say like Chupah is not, Chupah is just the physical tetzorah of what started with Kedushin. Kedushin, you do it through Dibur.
Like with Taisus Nissus.
Yeah.
That idea if you could say the Kinyan works for the Leib to Kedushin.
Should work for you too.
Yeah.
You could tell. That.
And there's Lashanis in the Rishonim about that. There's a Kinyan.
Yeah.
Like the Chupah to the Kinyan.
There's a machlekes later where in Kedushin is a machlekes. You get to that in a second. About a Kedushin is a machlekes, but the Chupah is the kinyan. So you can learn these two ways. That says that the Metzias, the union of Chupah is the Metzias of what you're getting married for. So it's not a separate kinyan. That's the expression of what you did by Kedushin. You did by Kedushin, but you said you're now mine, and actually now you become mine. That's only an expression of the Metzias, but it's not a separate kinyan. It actually fits a lot if we learn Pshat in the whole thing. Like the Rebbe says here on the Shichas Chayit, I if you looked it up, here is a very interesting beer the Rebbe gives here. Okay, so Rebbe talks about the beginning of Hilchos issues. Vedic Aleph. The way he explains it is Mamish Baldik. Starts off like this. That's what the Rambam says. Kedem matan teiro ya odem tiket es pede kalv alochav. Kedem matan teiro ya odem tiket ya isha b'shuk. Im rotza hu v'hi liso isa. Machnisa isa lebeise. Ubeyalo beyalo b'na. Betile lisha. Ki mishenit ma teiro. Nitztav Yisrael se'im yirtza ha'ish lisa isha. Yikna isa tchila b'fnei. Hakachti ila lisha. Shnemer ki yikach isha shabon. So the Rebbe quotes this Rambam. And the Rambam says, Reishel Chasishas Mavayar Rambam Rak Inyan Gedush. Dina Suyin Lei Hiskir At Pedicute. Sharach Shon Mavayar Shayovi Islabesa Isachti. Yichud Zehu Anikra Knisa Chupah. Who Anikra? He brings the whole thing. And the kasha is, why doesn't the Rambam in the beginning, when he tells us all the protim of marriage, tells us what the Kedushin is and all kinds of other things, he says, Kedushin is Aktchilas Mitzvahs HaNesuyin. And the Rambam here explains Esrim Shemes HaShaychim VaHalocha Seilu. Those 20 things that has to do with marriage. And when it comes an issue of what Chupah is, the Rambam doesn't mention Chupah here at all. Then also the Shaila, why is the Rambam mentioning how it was before Matan Torah? I know how it was before Matan Torah. Yashlema, he wants to say this. Shesvira la Rambam, sheikach chidush atayre binyan nishos b'Yisrael lo rak begeder kedushin. Okay, now shekol geder the kuchaneru, the whole kedushin is only tzivi atayre. The inyan hanesuyin lei nishtane mahus begeder ha'ishos b'kfish hoy keder matayre. That didn't change. Inyan hanesuyin atzmon, he uses the lashon who hametzias the chaya ishos. V'loshon Rambam machnis eis alater beis v'tiyel elisha. ובזה אין שינוי עיקרי בין קדם התתל לאחר. וזהו שדיוק הרמב"ם בלשון כי משניתנו תורה לישראל נצטוו שאם ירצה איש אליסה. If you want to marry, what's marrying? Marrying is like we said before Matan Torah, that was marriage. You have to be keden bach kechtel. Eiluch mafarish in the kuchen. And he doesn't tell us what the nesuyin is. Kichidush hatayra ein the binyan lisa isha. Inye zen nishar k'mei shehoya keinem atotayim. El lag b'dechluchin ha'kein milin nesuyin, yikneis et chila v'chakafti l'isha. And that's why the Rambam first goes before Matotayim. Eizur ha'kakdome l'hoven ha'kiddush. But to tell us the Hakadore of what Ishus is. So it's not the pshat that the Rambam doesn't talk about nesuyin. Forget the Rambam starts open nesuyin. That lift him out in Torah, you would marry what it was nesuyin, this is what it was that you took her home. And that's nesuyin now too. Now there's a tzivui that they gave, you have to have tush before. Again, Laloche says, Kizel Yisot Shitas Rambam, the Geder Chupah. She Matzinu Kame Shitas Ma'u Knisol Chupah. The Rambam posts like she Knisol Chupah Hain Yirchut. She Yov Yeis Lot Beisa V'Yis Yachadim. And there's a Korev Ma'ed L'Tira Yishus the Kedim Matutayim. It's Mamish L'Bevor. She Machnisol Beisa V'Yil. That's what the Rambam says. Hain L'Fisha Svira Leila Rambam. She'inyan hanesuyin shalachar Matan Torah, who inyan hanesuyin shekeit Matan Torah. The hainu hamaiseh the chaya ishus. That's all it is. It's not doing something. It's not like a separate kinyan that you're going. The lochik is sheyochal alish shev nesuya. Harei shovel lederech hanesuyin shekeit Matan Torah. Says even though there are nafkin in it. So according to this, it seems that according to the Rambam holds that the union of Nesuyin is not a separate kinyan, so to speak, not a separate geder. It's the end of the Kedusha. That means the Nesuyin is something that's living together as husband and wife. That's Nesuyin. That's the Mitzvahs. Now the Torah made a din that before you live together, you have to do something. As a Hakdom, as part of the start off with that, so this fits to the side that we said. We said the two sides of it. One side is that there are two separate inyonim. There's a kinyan of kedushin, kinyan of kofer. One is Eidus and one is the soyin. The other side is that there's only one thing. There's only one marriage, and there's the mitzias of it. The mitzias of it is the nesuyin, the living together, and then you have the akdami. In order to live, the Torah wants that you should first tell her that you're going to do it, mekadosh b'dibur, and then it happens. Which Bechem is similar to, we find another place like this. And it would be the same thing as an example. In the Gay Gators, what the Rambam says, in order to, whoever wants to nichnas lebris, what does he have to do? 3 things. So if you ask somebody, what do you have to do for Gators? 3 things. Bolas mitzvahs, Mila, Tefillah. Rambam doesn't say that. Rambam saying 3 things: Mila, Tefillah, and Korban. And the Rabbi asks a shayla, the difference here. Why doesn't he say Kabbalah's mitzvahs? So the Rebbe says Kabbalah's mitzvahs is not a Tanai how to be Megayah. Kabbalah's mitzvahs is the Metzias of Giyur. When the Rambam says Hareitzel Likonis Libris means Hareitzel Kabbalah's mitzvahs. So there is certain things which is not a Tanai. Milah Tefillah is Noyim, how you become a ger. This is not how you become a ger. This is Gerus, the Metzias of Gerus. You have to have certain conditions when you have the Messias Ageres. You have the Milah Tefillah and the Korban. Same thing here also. When the Rambam comes out, the way the Rebbe learns here, that it's the Metzias of issues, the Metzias of marriage, like the Torah gave us a mitzvah of Kedushin, but this is not part, it's part of mitzvah now, but they told us to do it. But the gather of it is, the gather of a Metzias as a hemshech to Kedushin. No, it's a hemshech. No, Kedushin is after the soy. Yeah, but the soy is after the Kedushin. I mean, it's all one. In other words, it starts off, the Inyan is Chayim Mitzias.
You can't say that the Kiddushin is completely independent and the Torah just wants there to be a Kiddushin when you're doing it a soy. Meaning based on his beer, the Rebbe.
Yes, you could say it. Could say. Good. So yeah, I don't think I don't know.
It's really, you could, the way the Rebbe was explaining,
No, but
you could really.
No, I think it fits. I just think it fits more. He says, "This is the Chayam Mitzias, and this is what is this." That before you do that, you got to say it.
It's like the Rebbe starts off with the Rambam starts off with the Nisuyin before
And the Torah was Mitzvah to say before. It's stop it like this.
Before Matan Torah, there's no Kenyan before.
There's another place where the Rebbe talks about that. There's no Shiur of Kedushin, there was no Mitzias of Kedushin.
No, not Kedushin, I'm saying
The story there was. There is no gather of Eishes by a woman. But how does a kinyan happen? It's not that you make a kinyan. Just live together and then you're married.
Then see that was
Sure, there's something that, yeah, but it's not al din that you have to do something outside of the marriage. The marriage itself is the marriage.
Why does marriage have to be a Kenyan?
Yeah.
Meaning
It's you're married together.
As equals to a certain extent.
because there's halachas which are
Before Matan Torah.
So if you say shots like this in Rambam,
The Kenyan? That's not that the husband owns the wife, Kenyan. It's not regarding that. Say that's a chiddush. That's the
Torah
who says it was a Kenyan?
doesn't have to be a kinyan. I'm trying to say that she becomes an Eishes, but not because there's no other kinyan. Actually, we see it. The Gemara in Kedushin of Hey, there's a machlekes. Rabbi says that you could be mekadesh through Chupah. And that's what Rabbi holds. Rabbi holds differently. And there's Gemara's also mix a kalbachem and matach, which is gamer, certainly is. Gamer, certainly it could be kain. And so machlekes, Rabbi holds that Chupah is gamer. And Rabbi doesn't hold like that. Rabbi says you can. Now, I'm not going into the details of that Gemara, but it comes out in simple words. If you hold that Chupah is a kinyan, you can make such a kal v'chemer. Without the details of Upshlow, the Gemara speaks up the kal v'chemer. There's two kinyanim here. The Shaila, what does the kinyan accomplish? So if it accomplish gamer, the Gemara feels you can accomplish certainly the Haskalah. But if you hold it's not a kinyan b'chlal, how could you say you can mekadesh through Chupah? So Rabbi, who doesn't agree that you can be mekadesh through Chupah, because he holds that Chupah is not a kinyan. So you can't do it. We even seen the Lashonis in the Gemara. There's one Lashon in the Gemara, Chupah shalachar kedushin, and another one, the Chupah shal yidei kedushin. Chupah shalachar kedushin is what Rabbi says. It's two in Yonim, one comes after the other. And that's what Rabbi says. And Rabbi uses the Lashon Chupah shal yidei kedushin. It's the Chupah that comes as a hemshech to the kedushin. And halacha is always like Rabbi. So it makes sense that the Rambam should hold that way, that the Chupah is not a mitzias for itself. The Chupah is the mitzias of living together. That's the mitzias of Chupah. That's what it is. That's what the Nisuyin is. Like it was before Matan Torah, because up to the rest.
the Geir should cut it on their.
Oh, he goes into that. The English is different. Says.
So once the book is the sex, it's
So
something.
I'll read that paragraph. Ze move nach Chile ben Ishas Begerish. Can hit them Rambam din Ishas Kedem at Teire. A Schenker gab Begerish, and he didn't say that. Keep the Gael Ishas, I get there Ishas the Kedem at Teire, Nisha gab Lachem at Teire and so. The Begerish, I get see the Shlume Sabal by the way it's by Goyim, Leib Mahana Cloudy. So it's like a separate, that became different. That Teire, I didn't never get. So it's not
Independent from.
Right. Yeah. And we see that the Rambam by very says he quotes before that by Geirish the Rambam doesn't write this anyway. So it could be two separate things. But he said another thing we see in Rambam, the Rambam holds that the bracha that we make birchas eiresen is birchas hamitzvos. And that's why he says if you did the Eid Kedushin already, you didn't make the bracha, you can't make the bracha later. Because it's too late. Like all the birchas hamitzvos. It's a big machlekes in the Rishonim. The Rosh holds it's a birchas shavach vaydo. It's birchas hamitzvos. But the Rambam holds it's birchas hamitzvos. But the Rambam himself holds the birchas brachas that if you have a mitzvah that has two parts to it, there's a tzibur first and there's another tzibur later, you make the bracha afterwards. So if the Rambam holds the birchas hamitzvos, why don't you make it after the Nisuyin? But that's only a good kasha if you hold this. Kedushin and Nisuyin have two things. There's one opinion of getting married. But there's one tzivui, and then there's another tzivui. So you have to make it after a second, like by sukkah. There's a mitzvah to make a sukkah. Like a sukkah stasa b'chol. And there's a mitzvah yeshiva sukkah. We don't make a bracha lepeil. Ashik shonim mitzvah yishal mitzvah, but like this, ashik shonim mitzvah lasei sukkah. Because there's a mitzvah acheres that comes together after that. So you make it by leishav. So here too, you should make the bracha by the nesui, not by the kedusha. But that's only if you hold it two tzivui. But if it's all one thing, forget it. It's a long hemshech. The long hemshech that starts here and finishes there. So it's one maisa. So you make it in the beginning of the maisa. So it all fits if you hold it. The Rambam holds it's all one nekudah. Now all this brings us to one maskana. This is the moker. Because of this word the Rambam gets this din bichlal, because they ask that bia could be used as chupah. Doesn't say in Gemara bia could be used as chupah. Something that the Yukim will change is a Gemara. It doesn't say clear, because it doesn't say what chupah is. And the Rambam says, as we read before, that so the Rambam says bia helps. You know why? Because if the whole union of the Suyi is just the expression of the Chaye issues, then Avada is the best Chupah you can imagine. If Chupah is a Metzias for itself, who knows? Who knows how you do it? But if the whole union is the Chaye issues, which is the Bia, isn't that the best Chupah? So Avada is the best Chupah. But that's what the Rambam says, that if you go aleh and associate Shemus Pachash, she becomes the The question, one of the questions he had was, why is it that by Bia it doesn't say it has to be b'tei basic? By regular chupah, that yichud has to be b'tei basic. Why doesn't it have to be b'tei basic? Very simple. Why? If you do Bia, you don't need anything else. Bia is the best type of chupah. When you do the Torah was mechadish, you have a limud that this doesn't have to be mamish Bia, but it has to be dover hakorov lebia. And what's the dover hakorov lebia? All the protein. It has to be that it should be yichud, shachnos lebeise, as close as possible that you get to what Bia is. So that
back then you were able to buy a b'shuka and then be kind to her. You have to take it to your house and be buy a. I mean, why isn't he suing? How does the deal that's not the how could that finish the the copy?
But here you have the issue before.
So the method allows
this. Because the whole thing I told you already, the Achnos Lebayis is to make sure that it's L'Shem B'Suyin. But here, you know it's going to be that. If he does it L'Shem B'Suyin, and maybe, I don't know how it would be by a goy nowadays or by format and Torah. But the word that Chupah is Kaina, something that makes the most sense. And you don't need anything else. If it's going to be not through Bamish Bia, it's going to be, the Bia is Kaina. But if it's going to be not through real Bia, then what is the way to be Kaina? Anything that's close to it. So therefore, there it has to be a basic. And I want to say that's why the Rambam, when he says, by Habuala Rusosta, he says that Ishtay B'chol Dover. And the kasha was, how can by a regular Chupah, which is not Bia, the Rambam says, Ishtay Gemura L'chol Dover. So he made us for that by the case of Bia Shvach. I'm trying to say by the case of Bia Shtarket. That's the real Chupah. And the case of Chupah, Yichud, Achmas Lebayis is the secondary. So the Chupah here is Fakir. So I'm saying, Adarabah, because of that, the Rambam does this. If something is clear, you don't have to add any verse. Chupah, Ishtay, that's it. You have to say Ishtay Gemura, but what does Ishtay Gemura? So how be Ishtay? When something is a chidush, and you might think maybe it doesn't work 100%, it's only a little bit. And they remember it's Ishtay Gemura. So when he talks about Chupah, later about regular Chupah, which is Yichud, but not Bia, he says, I'm telling you, Mutter lo v'leh b'chol Ishtay Gemura l'chol Dover. Don't worry. Even though it's not Bia, by the case of Bia, the Ram didn't have to say it. The Ram didn't have to say, Ishtay Gemura. Well, why else? That's what Chupah is. Chupah is the Metzias of Chaye Ishus. Doesn't have to say it. This explains another svara also. What is the reason why Chachamim Aser Arusa lo v'yaleh? What's the reason? What's the gzeira here? Usually Chachamim made a gzeira because you might come to do something. If she's an Arusa, she's not in the Suya. But with the Raisa, she's mutter. Why did Chachamim make it doesn't? He says that. That's the Rambam. Arus asur al bayim divrei. What's the svara? So you say the svara is like this, because be'etzem, the real chupah is beer. Imagine if they'd be able to be mutter beer, you wouldn't see the difference between beer as stam beer or beer l'shem chupah, shem nesuyin. So the Chumah wanted that they should be clear. You can't have beer before, now you have beer. Now the truth is there is a difference, because a regular beer is just doing beer. When it's l'shem nesuyin, he has a mind of shem nesuyin. But that can I krich in Yaniv's kopf, who knows what's in his mind? We know what the Ran says in Psochim, why is the Chumah made a ether, made a chiyuv of Dike, Beetle's not enough, because Beetle is the Leib, and Inka ain't they say in Shabbos. We don't know what if a person will understand this. So the Chumah made it very clear that you can't have beer. And therefore, if you do have beer, L'Shem Nesuyin, it's clear it's L'Shem Nesuyin. Oh, because it's not going to. Yeah, what happens if a ball and a sausage before Nesuyin? What's the deal? She becomes a Nesuyin automatically. That's to do with L'Shem Nesuyin. That's what he said. A ball and a sausage based chomah, makas makas makas. You're not allowed. We don't say not based possibilities. Why not? It's another shayla altogether. It's nothing to do with this. Why don't we say it? Rambam has all clothing when we say it. Argus of the game. But here for sure, we don't say it. So only if he has it, will shave Nesuyin. So you have the whole thing in kop. So Chumah wanted to ask it to say you can't do that because then the Nesuyin. But that's all based on what I'm saying, that the real chupah is beer. But maybe this is the ultimate beer. And so when the Rambam says this, is by Chupah's nida. I believe it's a nida after peshnichnas the Chupah sound late gomer on the suyin. That's where he says late gomer. And what is late gomer on the? Oh, so let's go back. Well, there's late gomer. Let's okay. So here the Rambam says, and then I'll get back to a second. Here the Rambam says the beginning that she's ishta l'chol davar by bia because ishta l'chol davar that's a brand for everything. Not like he says you might make she's ishta l'chol davar. When it comes to a regular nichnas of the Chupah, and he says oisem nida, and they say a Chupah in the royal levila. After shnichnas l'Chupah v'nis yachadimo legomer on the suyin. What's that legomer on the suyin here? He did everything he did. But Lake Gomra on the Suyin means that she's still a Narusa. Why does he write Lake Gomra on the Suyin? What he means in the Suyin is, again, based on what we said before, that there is one unit here with a Tchila and a Gemara. So this is a little deichik, but the word Mesuyin here doesn't mean the din of Mesuyin. But that would be enough. Harei Arusa. The Mesuyin here is more a broad sense. The marriage did not get finished there. I did Kedushin already, but Kedushin needs a Gemara. And the Gemara is the Chupah. And since it's Eine Royal Labiyah, what's the reason why Taka Eine Royal Labiyah takes according to the Rambam? Based on what I'm saying? But yet, we really understand why Kedushin Shein and Mesurim Labiyah takes. Because the whole union of Chupah, Chupah Shein Royal Labiyah, because the whole union of Chupah is Bam is Biyah. So even if you don't do Biyah, the Chachamim said you don't have to do Biyah, but it has to be pretty close to Biyah, has to be royal Biyah. But if it's not royal Biyah, then you're missing out the point. That's the reason why, if it's not royal, after royal Biyah. But if she's a nida, like Gomer on the Suyin, the Gemara that in the Suyin has to accomplish. So that's what the Rambam says is like Gomer on the Suyin because of that. So it comes out that here we have all the things answered. When he said, Yichud Zeh, V'anikra Knisa L'Chupah, what's the Lashon Yichud Zeh? Rambam is trying to tell us that the whole Knisa L'Chupah mainly is the Yichud. It has to be Chamos L'Bayis too. The whole thing, because Nesuyin, Chupah is being together. Chaya Ishus. Chaya Ishus, what's next best to Chaya Ishus? Yichud. In the Yichud Gufa, there's a din of Chamos L'Bayis. But the Rambam is trying to give us the Hagdorah of what Chupah is, what Nesuyin is. So he says, Yichud Zehu Adikran. The Yichud is what counts. The Yichud is the most important part. Because that makes it that we have something close to Biyah, which is the Ikar Chupah. So if you look through now, all the things are explained. Why he says Yichud Zeh, why Abal and Asosei doesn't have to be B'tei Beisei. Why he says here, Ishta l'choldover doesn't say Gemara because it doesn't have to tell us by beer. How about Ishta l'choldover? Over there he says not. Then there's another thing which maybe could be answered for this also, but I'm not sure. And that is that there's a din that if he did beer, if he did hachnos the bais, if he did yichud, the base saw, then the Chupah works. Hachnos the bais, the base say, or if he did it, the base saw. But what I'm saying is that the whole thing is the yichud. And what's the yichud? Because the yichud is close to beer. The yichud is beer. Yichud is close to beer. So if that's why it needs the base say, we show more the chaya issues. Could be, this is already also not so much, it could be that if it's done in her house and she lets herself have the yichud l'shem nesuyin, that's stronger if it would be in the outside house. In other words, what we're trying to say, you got to look at the halacha. The halacha is that yichud works according to the Rambam. If she's machnisa lebeis say or lebeis saw. The beis say is very close to bia. The beis saw has a mila that she allows him to do yichud. It's her house, and nevertheless she takes him. So that's also strong. If it's in a strange house, then it doesn't work. It should be a chitish din. The din is like that. But the din is that the yichud the beis saw works. And I think it could fit maybe to this whole hemshech that because that's close to her house. Now, according to this, we're saying that if it's not close to Yidiyah, it's missing the point. It's missing the point of what Chupah is. So why is the din? The Rambam Halacha Vov, Amaras Esei Beira Birchas Chasanim, Beleidis Yachadim Bebeisei, Adayin Arusei, Shein Birchas Chaisan Suyin. Oh, and he says, in Ovar Banosa Beirach, if did it, ain't it sort of ain't Chazer Mavor. So if it's not the Beisei, that means that it's not close to Chupah, then it's nothing. So why does the Birchas Chasanim work? Yeah, but it's no kache, because it's a din in the Birchas Chasanim. Since Birchas Chasanim is a special din, so that works as long as it came after the Kedusha. It's Birchas Nesuyin. But it's not showing that the Nesuyin started already. It's like it doesn't start if it's not close to Chupah. But the Brachas have a special din. There's Rayis too that the Brachas have a special din. This answers another Nekuda here. Just like the Rabbi asked the Shaila, why in the beginning of Hilchos issues, Rambam doesn't say anything about Chupah. Should have started off. There's Chupah. The answer is verkehrt. He talks about Chupah. He says that lifting Matan Torah was this and this, and this is Chupah. And then he goes up to Kedusha. I have a similar Shaila. Why does the Rambam not start in Perek Yud when he speaks about Chupah? Not tell us first what Chupah is. He goes roundabout. He says like this: Arusa asura lebaylam dipusofrim, and abola resose makimax magus. Vafilo kitcha would be also lovi yeleo. Ad shiyove selatir beise v'yisachet v'yichot zanikot tizlot. But they go like that. What does that? Should have started off. Chupah areyu lachnos lebay yichot lachnos lebayis. Also lovi yeleo ad she'asay lachnosen lachupah. Why does he tell us what Chupah is? I'm saying, I'll tell you why. Because the way I said before, what's the reason why the Chachamim Aser and Arusa L'Biyah is because the Chupah is Biyah. So by saying it this way, he's telling us before he starts what the gather of Chupah is. He said, Arusa Asur L'Bayla called which is also to have Biyah. And right away you stop and think, why is it also to have Biyah? That tells you because you're going to jump the gun and you're going to have Biyah before you have to have Biyah. Which tells us that the Ikar of Chupah is Biyah. But the Rambam, by the way, tells us that. But then the Rambam could have made it very clear. He should have started. Chupah are Biyah. And you could also do something else. But then, it's not true. Chupah is not only Biyah. And the halacha is we actually don't find in the Gemara Chupah is bia. The Rambam can't start off like that. So the Rambam wanted to start off in such a way to teach us what the gather of Chupah is, without saying, and that is that it's bia, without saying clearly that it has to be bia. So how does he do it? By telling us something that will bring you to it. No, she's also a bia, which you start thinking why. So you'll figure out what I said. Everyone can figure this out. The reason is because the ikir is bia, so they didn't want to confuse that you can't be matching with bia. Then you'll have bia for the suya. So that's why he started off. So now he said she's also the Bible with the So you understand why? Because the ikir is chupah. Oh, so we know what chupah is. Then the Rambam continues the protein. But my son chupah, you don't have to go all the way to bia. So he starts off. What is chupah? And then he said, but that's the real. So that's the say that the Rambam goes. So according to this, it seems like all the Yukim are answered, and all I think it fits more if you learn like the Rebbe with the Sichas. The opinion of Nesuyin is the mitzias of Chaya issues. The Leib, it's the mitzias of Chaya issues. It's Chupah. So what I'm trying to say is complete opposite of what he tried to say. He tried to say that Chupah is nothing to do with beer. There's a special deen that your mutter will be is better, etc. And that's like a secondary thing that you do Chupah, it's also, if you do beer, it's also Chupah. I'm saying punkt verkeerd. The Iker Chupah is good beer. But Chachamim said it doesn't have to be beer. And maybe the reason they didn't say that it should be beer, because the priest is just like Rav Man Gidam and the Mekadesh be beer. So the same thing to have the Suyin through beer. They're abundant for sight reasons, for tznius reasons. They didn't want you to do it. As long as you're able to do it, that secondary, do better secondary. But you can't take away the fact that this is what the real Nesuyin is. But this is Chaya issues as it comes out from the beginning of Hilchas issues and from here.
If the beginning of the Nesuyin is beer, it's just a base family.
No, not L'Shem Nesuyin.
Right now, L'Shem Nesuyin.
But if you do L'Shem Nesuyin, forget it. That's good.
I'm saying if it's not L'Shem Nesuyin, why not?
Because the Chachamim asked it. I said why? Chachamim said that if you're going to allow you to have beer, then what will be the Nesuyin? If the Nesuyin is beer, and you're going to have beer before, what do you see that which one makes Nesuyin?
But the toilet is Nesuyin?
No. If you do it L'Shem Nesuyin, it is. If you do it Shalei L'Shem Nesuyin, no, the Rabban never asked it for him. They didn't ask it L'Shem Nesuyin here.
But even if they have an asik, maybe with the evidence will be.
If you have a mind, and the ever talk about it. No, it's not with the evidence.
Saying if you don't have a mind,
if you don't have a mind, you're not allowed to have beer.
I know, but the toilet there's high issues.
But it's only for L'Shem Nesuyin. What happens if a guy's mezana with a woman becomes his wife? Has to be L'Shem Nesuyin, L'Shem marriage. Even by the goy, even by the lives of Matan. If you bring her home, L'Shem Nesuyin. Has to be L'Shem Nesuyin. If you bring home the Azayin, it's not doesn't become a wife.
Fact of the rice person, he boil her even before he brings it to the